I remember the first time I walked those empty hospital halls at midnight. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly, painting the walls in pale, uneven shadows. Outside, a thick fog rolled across the parking lot, swallowing the edges of the building in a soft, damp gray. I could hear the faint hum of machines long abandoned and the occasional creak of old floorboards under my feet. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, dust, and something older, something that hadn't left in decades. Every door I passed seemed to sigh, like it remembered every patient who had ever whispered their fears inside these walls. I felt drawn to one room in particular, a room with a cracked nameplate and a door that refused to fully close. And as I reached for the handle, I heard it, a soft, deliberate breathing from the other side. That's when I saw it. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above, pale and uneven. It was late, too late for anyone to be here. The floor was cold under my shoes, sticky in spots where something had dried. I passed the cafeteria. Rows of tables lay in shadow, silver trays stacked neatly. A faint smell of old food lingered, mixed with bleach, and then I saw him, a janitor, alone. His mop traced slow arcs across the tiles. The liquid left a glossy trail reflecting the flickering ceiling lights. His hands moved steadily, rhythmically, but his eyes, they didn't look at the floor. They hovered upward, fixed, unblinking, as if the ceiling held some terrible secret. The lights sputtered, one flicker, then another. Each time, the reflection in the wet floor twisted slightly, as though the puddles themselves were breathing. I slowed. My breath caught in my throat. The smell of disinfectant was sharp, almost choking, but faintly metallic underneath. He didn't notice me, didn't notice the hallway behind him. I stepped closer, curiosity knotting in my chest. The mop scraped the tile. A soft, dragging rhythm. It was hypnotic, pulling me in, and then he was gone. I blinked. A flash, a shift, and nothing but empty cafeteria, the hum of the lights, the lingering smell of bleach. Silence settling over the floor like dust. I swallowed. The tiles glimmered where the mop had been, but no reflection. No janitor, not even a shadow. I thought I heard footsteps. Soft. Behind me. But when I turned, nothing. Just the stale air and my own pulse in my ears. The ceiling lights flickered again. One sputter, long enough to leave a pause. The cafeteria looked different somehow. Bigger. Darker in the corners where the shadows pooled. I leaned against the wall. Cold paint pressed into my palm. A shiver ran through my arms. Something in the smell, sharp, chemical, too clean, made my stomach tighten. I told myself I had imagined him, that the janitor had simply left. But the air still carried him. A weight, heavy and damp. I moved forward, each step careful, slow. The wet tiles reflected my own feet. My shadow stretched ahead, then wavered, and for a moment it felt like it wasn't mine at all. I stopped by a trash bin. The metal was sticky. Fingers brushed against it and recoiled. The silence pressed in, thick and almost listening. The cafeteria doors were still closed. I could see the faint outline of chairs through the glass. Nothing moved, nothing, except the light trembling in the ceiling like a pulse, a soft rustling. I froze. It came from the corner where the mop had lain. Just a whisper of movement. The smell of disinfectant filled my nose again. Stronger now, overpowering, clinging to the back of my throat. I blinked, and it was gone again. I leaned back, pressed to the wall. The hum of the lights filled the space. My heartbeat matched the flicker above. Slow, uneven. I didn't dare step closer. I didn't want to. Something watched from above, from the ceiling. I stayed there a long time. Breath shallow, every sound magnified, the drip of water somewhere, the faint creak of the door hinge, the static in the light. And then, finally, I walked on. The hallway stretched, empty, but I could still feel him. The janitor, not moving, not breathing, yet present. Every step forward I could smell bleach. Every shadow seemed to hold a trace of him. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. And yet, in the corner of my eye, I knew the tiles still glimmered, as if he had never left. The corridor was empty. Faint fluorescent hums stretched above. Late night, the hospital quieted to a stillness that pressed into my chest. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, sharp and sweet, mixing with something old. Dusty. Room 316 waited at the end of the hall. Its door seemed colder than the rest. I could feel it even before I touched the handle, a chill that crawled across my fingers, up my arm. I paused. The pale light under the door was steady, but it didn't feel warm. It felt expectant. I opened it slowly. The hinges creaked, soft, uneven. Inside, the bed sat neatly made, sheets pale, tucked with precision. It was as if someone had just left and was waiting to return. The floor tiles reflected the dim ceiling lights. The walls seemed closer than before, narrowing around me. And then I heard it. Scratching, soft, hesitant, against the far wall near the corner. Slow, almost deliberate, like fingernails drawn lightly across plaster. I froze. Breath caught. The hum of the lights filled the silence, louder now, almost pressing against my ears. I leaned closer to the sound, closer to the wall, and the scratching stopped. The air grew thicker. The antiseptic smell sharper, almost metallic. My pulse ticked loud in my throat. The quiet returned. But something had shifted. The bed. It moved, just slightly. A soft dip, like weight had pressed down, then lifted. I stepped back. My shoes whispered across the tile. I wanted to reach out, wanted to touch the sheets, but the chill made my fingers tremble. The ceiling light flickered. A shadow crossed the floor. I turned, but nothing moved. Only the pale bed waiting. I listened. Every heartbeat, every hum of the room, every draft through the cracked window. Nothing else stirred. Nothing. Except the faintest sense of being watched. I circled the bed slowly. The scratching didn't return, but the room felt alive in small ways. The rustle of air, the shifting of shadows along the walls, the soft pulse in the floor beneath my feet. The sheets stayed pristine, untouched, yet the air smelled damp, like someone had just been here. I knelt beside the bed, pressed a hand to the mattress, cold, smooth, still. The faint outline of a body seemed remembered in the sag of the pillow, a soft exhale of air, or maybe just my own. Either way, it echoed too loudly in the room. I backed toward the door. My shoes scraped the floor, a quiet, uneven rhythm. The chill lingered on my skin. The bed didn't move again. I glanced over my shoulder once. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch toward me. The fluorescent light hummed, faltering for a long, slow beat, and then steadied. The door closed easily behind me. The corridor was empty. The antiseptic smell faded. The cold, though, it clung. Room 316 waited, silent, neat, patient. I walked on, each step careful, each breath shallow. But in the back of my mind, I could feel it. The bed remembered. The walls remembered. And the scratching would return. Someday. The corridor stretched long and empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pale and unsteady. The air was thick, carrying a faint smell of dust and antiseptic. It pressed against my skin, cold on my arms. Then it started. The intercom crackled, soft at first, then louder, whispers woven into static. I couldn't make out the words, but they felt meant for me. Each sentence a brush against the back of my neck, a tug at my pulse. I paused, breath shallow. The hum of the lights felt heavier, resonating through the tiles beneath my shoes. A faint rustling came from somewhere above. I stepped forward. Soft footsteps, careful, slow. The whispers followed, layered in static, wrapping around the hallway. I strained to hear meaning. Nothing, only intent. The farther I walked, the louder the voice became. Yet the words remained impossible to parse. They curved through the air, brushing my ears, pressing into my chest. I reached the far end of the hall. There it hung, the speaker, loose from the ceiling, swaying gently as though caught in some invisible breath. Its metal casing scraped faintly against the tiles above, adding a rhythm to the static. I held my hand out. Nothing. The voice stopped instantly. Silence dropped over the corridor like a wet, heavy cloth. I waited, heart loud, echoing against the walls. The speaker still swung, small shadows dancing on the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, cold, empty, waiting. I moved closer, each step careful, deliberate. My shoes whispered over the tiles. The light flickered overhead. A shadow stretched across the wall, detached, fleeting. I wanted to touch the speaker, wanted to hear it start again, but the silence was unbearable. So complete it seemed to swallow the hum of the lights. The rustle of my own clothes sounded like shouting. I stepped back. The corridor waited, patient, breathless. I didn't look up at the ceiling. I didn't dare. The static had been gone. The whispers vanished. Yet the weight lingered. It felt like eyes pressed down from above, invisible yet certain, watching each careful movement, following the pulse of my breath. I walked on slowly, the tiles cold under my shoes, the air thick with that metallic, dusty tang. Shadows shifted just out of reach. The speaker swayed. No sound, just the echo of what had been. And I knew it would start again. Not now, not yet. But soon, the corridor was empty. But the dread remained. Soft. Waiting. A presence that would follow until the lights failed completely. The nurse's station was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed softly, flickering in a pale rhythm. Late night. Empty corridors stretched from every side, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and old paper. A chart lay on the counter, alone. Edges curled slightly, as if it had been waiting. The patient's name I didn't recognize. The number, the details, everything was real enough, but it wasn't supposed to exist. I lifted the chart. The paper felt cold, brittle under my fingers. A faint rustling of pages followed me as I turned down the hall. The hum of lights seemed louder, pressing against my ears. Room 410. The door waited at the end of the corridor. A shadow pooled beneath it. I paused. The air smelled of metal and something faintly sweet. Breath caught in my throat. I pushed the door open. The bed was empty. Sheets pulled tight, corners sharp. But there was an indentation. Soft, faint, like someone had just risen. The room was colder than the hall. Chill crept across my skin, sliding beneath my sweater. The pale light stretched shadows along the walls, stretching and shrinking with the flicker above. I stepped closer. Tiles whispered beneath my shoes. Air thickened around my chest. A cold weight pressed down. Shallow breath. A tremble in my arms. Then I heard it. "Why are you here?" No echo, no direction. Just the whisper, soft, close, insistent. I froze. The bed's indentation seemed deeper now. The sheets shifted slightly, as if sighing under the weight I could not see. My pulse thudded, loud in the quiet. The hum of the fluorescent light matched it. I tried to speak. Nothing came. The air felt damp against my throat, heavy. Each inhale pulled in the scent of antiseptic and something older. I circled the bed slowly. The whisper did not repeat, but the cold pressed on. The shadow at the foot of the bed seemed thicker, closer. I knelt. Hand hovered above the sheet. Cold air brushed my fingers. The indentation felt like it remembered a body, a presence. Still lingering, I backed away. The room followed me with silence, a hum, a rustling, almost behind the wall. Shivers ran down my spine. I felt eyes, invisible, tracking every motion. I stood at the door, paused, breath shallow. The faint metallic scent mixed with the antiseptic, sharp in my nostrils. The weight on my chest loosened slightly, but it did not leave. I left the chart on the counter, walked down the corridor slowly. Tiles cold beneath my shoes. Shadows stretched long, trembling with the flicker of light. The nurse's station was empty when I returned. The chart lay where I had left it, but I could still feel the presence, the patient who did not exist. The hallway waited, quiet, patient, breathless. I walked on, each step careful, each rustle of my clothes echoing in the still air. And somewhere, just beyond the reach of sight, the whisper remained. Soft, cold, as if it had followed me from the room, through the hall, into the shadows behind the lights. Room 410 waited. The bed waited. And I knew. It would remember I had been there. The hallway stretched farther than it should have. Fluorescent lights trembled above. Late night, the air still and heavy with dust and antiseptic. My shoes whispered across the cold tiles. The lights flickered, once, twice, then in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each pulse pressed against my chest echoed along the walls. Shadows stretched and recoiled, shapes twisted in the corners of my vision. I couldn't recognize them. Faces, hands, something smaller, closer to the floor. But each time I turned fully, nothing was there. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with the sharp antiseptic. Breath shallow. My pulse thudded. Every step forward seemed slower than the last. I reached the midpoint. The flicker slowed, then quickened again. Shadow shapes seemed to lean, to watch. The hum of the lights pressed in, vibrating along the tiles beneath my shoes. I moved carefully. The farther I walked, the colder the air grew. A draft brushed against my skin, carrying a faint rustle. The hallway felt alive, stretching and shrinking in time with the lights. Then at the end, a glass door, bare, silent. But when I stepped closer, I saw it, a small handprint, delicate, pressed into the glass, smudged slightly, yet unmistakable. I looked around. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No shadow moving toward me. Nothing had entered or left. I reached toward the glass. The cold pressed against my fingers. The handprint remained. Soft, damp, almost warm. I stepped back. Breath shallow. The flickering light stuttered. The shadows stretched once more, then recoiled. The hallway waited. I didn't turn away. I couldn't. Something lingered in the glass, in the still air, in the pulse of my own heartbeat. And then I walked on, each step careful, echoing softly against the tiles. The handprint stayed, silent witness. The hallway stretched behind me, empty, patient, waiting. The ICU hallway was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed pale and low. The night pressed against the windows. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something older, lingering. I passed a wheelchair, empty, still. The rubber wheels gleamed faintly in the dim light. The handles were worn smooth, polished by hands I would never see. I slowed. The floor seemed colder here. Each step echoed softly against the tiles. A faint hum filled the air, almost imperceptible, but pressing against my chest. I turned back. The wheelchair. Gone. I blinked. Tried to convince myself it had been a trick of the shadows. But the echo of rubber wheels lingered. Soft, deliberate, distant. Pulling me forward, I followed. Step by step, careful, slow. The hum of lights above mingled with the quiet squeak of what I thought might be the chair. The hallway stretched. Shadows shifted. Faint, twisting along the walls. Never still. And then I saw it. Leaning against a wall. Exactly where I had first passed it. Still. Silent. As though it had never moved. The air thickened. The antiseptic smell sharpened, metallic beneath it. I reached out. Cold metal pressed against my fingers. Smooth, familiar, but wrong. I stepped back. The faint echo of wheels returned, soft, impossibly far away, and yet close. The wheelchair waited, patient, alone. I circled the hall slowly. Every corner, every shadow seemed to flicker in rhythm with my breath. The hum of the lights pulsed faintly. I wanted to leave. But the hallway felt alive, watching, pulling me forward. I stared at the chair. Empty, yet heavy. The presence of someone or something seemed to linger in its seat. I walked past it again. Every step careful, shallow breath. The wheels did not move. The chair did not sway. Yet somewhere in the distance, I could feel it roll, slowly, silently, just beyond reach. I turned back one last time. The wheelchair leaned against the wall, exactly where it had first appeared. The hallway was quiet again. I walked on. Tiles cold beneath my shoes. Shadows still stretched and recoiled along the walls. The rubber wheels waited in silence, patient, alone. The ICU faded behind me. The chair remained. And I knew it would not leave. The nurse's station was empty. Pale fluorescent light stretched across the counters. The air smelled sharp, antiseptic, mixed with dust. Soft hums from the lights pressed gently against the walls. And then, voices, soft, urgent, layered into the hum, whispers threading through the still air. I paused, breath caught. The sound tugged at the edges of my attention. I called out, quietly. My voice was swallowed by the empty hall. No answer, just the whispers weaving around me, papers fluttered. Small white caught in an invisible draft. Edges quivered. A note slid slowly across the counter toward me, softly, almost teasing. I leaned closer, fingers brushing the edge. The paper trembled. The words were simple. Leave now. The hum of the lights pressed harder. The air smelled sharper, metallic under the antiseptic. I swallowed, a chill running down my spine. The whispers continued, soft, indistinct, urgent, hovering just beyond comprehension, eyes straining across the counters, shadows shifting under the pale light. I stepped back. Tiles cold beneath my shoes. The papers stirred again, rustling like dry leaves. The note remained, waiting. I wanted to move closer, wanted to see who had written it. But the stillness pressed against me, heavy and patient. The whispers circled, rising then fading. Echoes of voices never fully forming. The hum of the lights flickered. A shadow stretched across the floor. I caught it out of the corner of my eye. But when I turned, nothing. The note. Soft, still, a quiet insistence. The air smelled faintly metallic now, sharp and close. I backed away, every step careful, breath shallow. The whispers followed, curling around the edges of the counters, pressing into the hall. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The note waited. The shadows lingered. The whispers remained. The nurse's station faded behind me, empty, silent, and yet I could still feel the urgency, soft, insistent. I walked on, tiles cold beneath my shoes, the air heavy with antiseptic and faint metal. The note remained. A quiet warning. The hall stretched, patient and waiting. I kept moving. Whispers curled around the corners, soft, persistent. A memory of voices urging me to leave. The hallway ended at heavy double doors. They were slightly ajar. Light spilled across the dark floor, pale and thin. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp with antiseptic. I stepped closer. Tiles cool beneath my shoes. The hum of the lights pressed softly against my ears. The door creaked slightly as I leaned in. Inside, the theater was empty, yet it felt waiting. Tables gleamed under the pale lamp, sterile, untouched. Every instrument polished, arranged with impossible precision. Shadows moved, precise, unnatural, slipping along the walls and under the lamps, stretching longer than they should. I inhaled sharply. The air was thick, still, carrying the faintest hint of rust and metal. A tapping began, soft, a scalpel striking metal, steady, methodical, as though someone was practicing in silence. I froze, breath shallow. The hum of the lights matched my heartbeat. Every tile reflected pale light back at me. Every shadow seemed to tremble. I stepped forward slowly. Floor tiles whispered beneath my shoes. The tapping continued, precise. No one visible. No motion of hands, only the instruments and their quiet rhythm. The pale lamp flickered. Shadows danced across the walls. I could see shapes, arms, bending unnaturally, lingering in corners. And then, a stillness. The tapping stopped. Suddenly, the silence was heavier than before. I could hear my own breath, shallow and fast. The air felt damp, cold, pressing. I moved closer to the table. Hand hovered above the steel instruments. Cold metal, smooth, shining. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The shadows stretched again. Unnatural, deliberate. I stepped back. Floor tiles pressed cool against my palms. The hum of the lights faltered, then steadied. I turned toward the door. The theater waited behind me. Every instrument gleamed. Every shadow lingered. Every empty corner held a presence. I left slowly, each step careful. The tapping had vanished, replaced by the quiet pulse of fluorescent light. The air smelled metallic and clean, cold but alive. The double doors closed softly behind me. The theater remained, silent, patient, and I knew it would be waiting. The maternity wing was quiet. Pale light stretched along the hall, trembling softly. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm fabric. Tiles were cold beneath my shoes. I stepped into the room. Empty, silent, and yet not quite. A cradle rocked gently in the corner. Slow, rhythmic. The wood creaked softly, a hollow, tired sound. I froze. The motion seemed deliberate, patient. A lullaby hummed from somewhere deep in the room, soft, fragile. No windows open, no breeze. And yet it moved through the air, curling around the corners, brushing against my skin. I approached slowly. Tiles whispered beneath my steps. The air smelled faintly of old blankets and baby powder. Warm, dry, faintly sweet. It pressed gently against my chest, heavy and familiar. The cradle shifted slightly as I neared. The creak matched the lullaby, each note echoing through the still air. Shadows gathered in corners, thin and hesitant. The light flickered, pale against the rocking wood. I stopped beside it, hand hovering, afraid to touch. The cradle's motion never wavered. The hum of the lullaby continued, soft, endless. A memory lingering in the room, I leaned closer. The floor beneath my knees cold, air thick and heavy with the smell of old fabric. The rocking slowed for a heartbeat, then continued. No one was there. No movement in the corners beyond the cradle. Yet the room was alive with quiet energy, breathless, waiting. I stepped back. The lullaby hummed in my ears. The cradle rocked alone. Shadows shifted slightly, stretching across the walls. The pale light trembled. I wanted to stay, wanted to see who had sung the lullaby. But the air pressed down heavy, cold. The smell of blankets lingered. The rocking did not stop. I left slowly. Tiles cooled beneath my shoes. The room held its quiet, patient. The cradle swayed gently. The lullaby faded into silence. The shadows stretched. Alone, yet not empty, the maternity wing waited. Soft, still, and I knew. It would remember I had been there. The nurse's station was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. My shoes whispered across the cold tiles. A logbook lay on the counter. Edges yellowed. Pages curling. I opened it slowly. Names filled the page. Some familiar, others erased from history. Faded, forgotten, yet written here with careful precision. I read the first aloud. The hum of the lights seemed to deepen. Shadows along the edges of the paper shifted, thin, curling like smoke in slow motion. The second name. The air grew heavier. A faint metallic tang pressed at my tongue. The tiles beneath my shoes felt colder, sharper. The shadows moved more deliberately. I continued. Each name whispered from my lips. The lights dimmed in response, flickering faintly. Shadows stretched and recoiled along the counter and walls. They seemed to reach, to twist toward the paper, hungry for recognition. The third name. The hum of the fluorescent light matched my heartbeat. Each inhalation pressed against my chest. The air felt thicker, almost viscous, clinging to my skin. I paused. A soft rustle of paper echoed. No one else was here. Yet the room was alive, bending with the weight of these names. I read on. 4th, 5th, 6th. Lights dimmed further. Shadows elongated across the walls, coiling like fingers. The antiseptic smell now mixed with something older, earthy, heavy, by the last name. The air was impossible to inhale. Each breath caught, shallow, sharp. My chest pressed under a weight I could not move. The hum of the lights felt distant, muted. The shadows along the counter pressed closer, unyielding. I lowered the logbook slowly, fingers trembling against the edges. The page seemed alive, vibrating faintly under my touch. The names lingered in the air like whispered echoes. I stepped back. Tiles cold beneath my shoes. The lights flickered once more, then steadied. Shadows remained, stretching along the walls, patient and quiet. The station felt empty again, yet heavy. Loaded with memory and absence, the logbook lay open, waiting. I walked away slowly, each step careful, echoing softly. The air remained thick, almost tangible. The names had followed me, lingering in the corners, in the shadows. The hallway stretched ahead, silent, patient, and I knew. These names would wait, waiting for recognition, waiting for someone to speak them aloud again. The bathroom was abandoned. Flickering fluorescent light pooled in pale patches across the cracked tiles. The air smelled faintly of mildew and cold metal. My shoes whispered softly across the floor. A mirror hung crooked on the wall. Cracks spidered across the glass like veins. I stepped closer. The reflection trembled. Not just mine. Something else moved behind me. I spun around. Empty. Air still. Only the faint hum of the lights pressed against my ears. The mirror. The cracks seemed to crawl. Slow, deliberate. Stretching across the surface. Veins twisting, shifting, alive. I leaned closer. Cold air brushed my skin. The smell of damp tiles and old soap filled my nostrils. My reflection blurred again. A pale figure lingered just behind my shoulder. Always just behind. I blinked. The figure vanished. Empty tiles, no sound. The glass trembled faintly. I traced a finger along the cracks. Metal cold beneath my skin. The pattern shifted. Veins curling in directions they shouldn't. Stretching toward me, the air grew heavier. Breath shallow. Each step back felt drawn into the mirror, slow, resistant. Shadows trembled along the walls. The hum of the light stuttered. I turned fully again. Still nothing. Yet the mirror whispered. In static, in movement, in the stretch of those veins, a presence pressing just beyond the reflection. I backed away, tiles cold beneath my shoes. The cracks continued to crawl, insistent, patient. The pale figure never left the corner of my mind. The bathroom remained silent. Still. Air heavy with mildew, metal, and a presence I could not see. I stepped out slowly. The mirror waited. The cracks stretched. And I knew it would remember me. The stairwell was quiet. Pale light pooled faintly along the edges of each step. The air smelled faintly of damp concrete and old paint. My shoes whispered softly against the tiles. I stepped down. 1, 2, 3. Each landing stretched longer than the last. The walls pressed close. Shadows clung, shifting as if breathing. The first landing felt normal. The second, slightly wrong. Tiles misaligned. The handrail colder than it should be. The hum of the fluorescent lights faint, uneven. I continued. Step by step, each landing repeated itself. Identical yet subtly wrong. A shadow where none should be. A tile cracked differently. A faint metallic tang in the air. By the fifth landing, I began to notice. The silence pressing too closely. My own heartbeat echoing in the narrow space. The hum of the lights stretching and stuttering. Footsteps. Mine, but softer. I descended further. Each landing a mirror of the last. The faint smell of mildew mixed with cold metal pressed against my skin. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. By the 10th landing, it hit me. A shadow on the wall. My own, and yet it moved differently. It waved, slowly, deliberately. As though greeting me, I froze. Air thickened, heavy in my chest. The handrail trembled faintly beneath my fingers. The hum of the lights deepened. I glanced around. The stairwell stretched endlessly above and below. Every landing the same. Every shadow waiting. I took another step. The shadow waved again. And then I realized I had been following it all along. Or perhaps it had been following me. I stepped back. The air smelled damp, heavy, unyielding. The lights flickered faintly. Shadows stretched and recoiled along the walls. Each landing identical, yet subtly wrong. I descended slowly, breath shallow, tiles cold beneath my shoes, handrail pressing chill against my palm. The shadow remained, patient, waving. I could not tell how far I had come, or how far I had yet to go. The stairwell waited. Endless, alone, and watching. The hallway was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed softly, pale pools of light stretching across the floor. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold metal. My shoes whispered against the tiles. Room 211 drew me in. A low, constant hum seeped from behind the door. Not mechanical, not static. It felt alive, vibrating through the walls, through the air, through my chest. I pushed the door open slowly. The light inside was pale, almost liquid. Machines that hadn't worked in years pulsed faintly. Alive with energy I could feel pressing against my skin. I stepped inside. The hum wrapped around me, thickening, coiling in the corners. Every surface vibrated subtly beneath my fingertips. Cold metal, smooth and unyielding. The smell of ozone mingled with dust, tangy and sharp. A monitor flickered. Static first, then a single word appeared. Stay. I froze. Breath caught in my chest. The hum intensified, resonating deeper, vibrating through my bones. Shadows gathered along the walls, stretching and curling like smoke. I reached toward the monitor, fingers trembling. Cold plastic pressed against my palm. The word remained. Stay! The machines pulsed again, rhythmic, insistent, each beat matching the low hum. I could feel it pressing against my chest, a weight I could not push away. I stepped back. Tiles cool beneath my shoes. The air thick, heavy, vibrating with static energy. The shadows stretched and recoiled in time with the pulse. I wanted to move, to leave, but the word lingered echoing in my mind. Stay, soft, insistent. I glanced around. Everything in the room alive with subtle motion. Faint lights flickered. Machines that should have been silent hummed and throbbed. Shadows curled like smoke, reaching toward me. I drew a breath. Shallow. The air pressed against my lungs, thick and vibrating. The word stayed. The hum persisted. The presence of the room pressed closer. I stepped toward the door. The hum followed. Machines pulsing, shadows stretching, air vibrating in my ears. The word stayed. I paused. Hand on the handle. Breath caught. The room felt endless, patient, aware. I stepped out slowly, tiles cold beneath my shoes. The door closed softly behind me. The hum faded to a whisper. The monitor went dark. Room 211 waited. Silent, insistent. And I knew. It would remember I had been there. The ward stretched long and silent. Doors lined the corridor, closed, heavy. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and damp concrete. My shoes whispered softly against the tiles. Only one door was open, far at the end. A pale light spilled along the floor, dim, uncertain. I stepped forward slowly. The tiles felt cold beneath my shoes. The hum of the lights pressed softly against my ears. Shadows gathered in corners, shifting faintly as I walked. Nothing moved inside the open room. Nothing alive, and yet a shadow lingered just beyond the edges of my vision, faint, indistinct, slipping along walls, corners, edges. I turned my head. The shadow shifted, closer, always just beyond the pale light. Every time I looked directly, it vanished. Every time I blinked, it returned. The air grew heavy, breath shallow. A metallic tang pressed at my tongue. The light flickered slightly, shadows stretching along the walls. The hum of the fluorescent lights deepened, almost vibrating through the floor. I stepped closer to the room. Hand hovering at the doorframe, cold metal beneath my fingertips. The shadow closer, stretching, patient, unyielding. I paused. A faint rustle echoed along the empty corridor. No one there. Only the shadow lurking in the corner of my vision. I felt its presence in the air, pressing against my chest. The door creaked softly as I leaned further inside. Floor tiles cool beneath my shoes. The light trembled faintly. The shadow shifted again, almost imperceptibly. Closer. Patient. I moved slowly along the room's edge, every breath thick, heavy. The air smelled of antiseptic and old fabric, faint and lingering. The shadow followed, unseen but undeniable. Waiting, watching. I stopped. The hum of the lights filled the space. The shadow stretched just beyond the dim glow. I could not see it fully, could not touch it. And yet I felt its attention, sharp and pressing. I turned away, careful, tiles cold beneath my shoes. The shadow remained, patient, waiting. A presence just out of reach of light. I left the room slowly, corridor stretching endlessly before me, doors lined in silence. The open door, still waiting. The shadow, still watching. The isolation ward remained, silent, heavy, and I knew. It would remember I had been there. The hall stretched long and silent. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. The air smelled cold, metallic, with a trace of dust. My shoes whispered softly against the tiles. At the far end, a figure appeared, pale, motionless, staring. I froze. Breath caught in my chest. Air thickened, pressing against my lungs. The hum of the lights deepened, low, insistent. The figure remained, still. Shadows gathered along the walls, stretching toward it. Coldness brushed my skin. A faint metallic tang lingered in my nostrils. I blinked. It was gone. Nothing. Empty hallway. Yet. The sound of soft footsteps continued. Rhythmic, slow, approaching. My heartbeat echoed in the silent hall. Tiles cold beneath my shoes. Every step measured, deliberate, yet I felt it before I heard it. Presence, unseen, patient. I took a careful step backward. The footsteps continued, closer, soft, insistent. The shadows along the walls trembled faintly. I couldn't see it, couldn't sense its form, yet I could feel it in the air, pressing, following, waiting. The lights flickered. A faint hum pressed against my ears. Air thickened with tension. Cold brushed my neck. A shiver ran down my spine. I moved slowly, each breath shallow, careful. The soft footsteps echoed behind me, always behind, never visible. The hallway stretched endlessly. Pale light pooled unevenly along the tiles. Shadows twisted along the walls, reaching, patient. The figure had vanished. But the presence remained. I stepped forward, careful. Tiles cool beneath my shoes. The footsteps followed. Slow, measured, unseen. I paused. Breath caught. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp. The hallway remained silent, yet alive. Waiting, watching. The pale visitor was gone, yet I could still feel it. Patient, approaching, and I knew. It would not leave. The hallway was empty. Lights flickered faintly overhead. The air smelled of rust and cold metal. My shoes whispered softly against the tiles. At the end of the hall, a door waited. Rusty lock, no key. Pale light barely brushing the edges of the frame. I pressed my ear to it. Whispers drifted through the wood, soft, almost urgent. Voices of patience long gone. A chill ran down my spine. Air thickened, pressing against my chest. The floor felt colder beneath my shoes. The hum of the lights deepened, low and persistent. The voices grew louder, pleading, insistent, words indistinct, but their meaning clear. Enter. Come closer. Do not leave. I could feel the door pulsing beneath my ear, vibrating faintly with each whisper. The rusted metal cold, rough against my skin. The hallway around me stretched, quiet and patient. I pulled back slightly. Shadows along the walls trembled, reaching toward the door. The air smelled of old paper, dust, faint antiseptic. A soft draft curled around my ankles. I leaned in again. The voices pressed against me, soft and hollow. Each whisper layered over the next. I could feel them brushing my mind, alive, patient. The door remained locked. The lock rusted, stubborn, unyielding. But the murmurs did not stop. They pressed closer, closer, insistent. Shadows stretched along the corridor, gathering at my feet. I stepped back. Floor tiles cold beneath my shoes. The air thick, vibrating with whispers. The door pulsed softly as if breathing. The voices softened slightly. Pleading still, waiting. I ran my fingers along the edge of the wood. Cold, rough, unyielding. Each whisper pressing in my mind. Echoes of lives long past. Faint scents of old blankets and antiseptic mingling with the rust. The hallway remained silent otherwise. Empty, yet alive with the presence of the locked room. Watching. Waiting. Patient. I pulled away. Breath shallow. The whispers faded to a murmur, but the door waited. Locked, rusty, insistent. And I knew it would remember I had been here. The linen closet smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric. I reached for the handle. Cold metal pressed into my palm. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the quiet hallway. I opened the door. Blankets stacked neatly, and then a shape, dark, pressed between the shelves. It didn't move. But I felt it. Its gaze, heavy, patient, creeping along my skin, settling in my chest. I froze. Breath caught. The faint rustle of fabric brushing against itself. The air smelled of old cotton and dust. I leaned closer. The shape remained still, but the weight of it pulled at my senses. The silence grew thick. The fluorescent light flickered softly. Shadows trembled along the edges of the closet. Cold pressed against my fingertips as I adjusted the blankets. I stepped back. The dark shape remained, watching, waiting, patient. I shut the door slowly. Metal clicked softly, and then a thump, soft, deliberate, As if it had exhaled, the hallway felt colder. The air thickened. My shoes whispered against the tiles. Each step careful, hesitant, I paused. The closet stood silent. But I knew it was still there. Behind the door, patient, shadows stretched along the walls. The air smelled faintly of dust and antiseptic. A hum lingered, low and steady, pressing against my ears. I walked away slowly, breath shallow. The presence remained, waiting, unseen but undeniable, and the closet. Quiet once more, but I could feel it. Patient, watching. The elevator doors slid open, a floor I had never seen before. Dim lights flickered, pale and uneven. Air thick with antiseptic, sharp and biting. The hallway stretched, silent. Cold tiles beneath my shoes, shadows pooled along the walls, a single button glowed. Soft, insistent, inviting, beckoning. I pressed it. The car moved without sound. Smooth, almost weightless, descending into darkness, air thickened. Faint hum pressed against my ears. The lights flickered again, weak. Shadows twisted along the walls of the elevator. The smell of antiseptic grew stronger. Cold brushed my skin. Breath caught. I could feel the motion more than hear it. The elevator slowed. Nothing to mark the floors. No numbers. No familiar hum of mechanics. Only the thick pressing quiet. The faint hum beneath the metal walls. A vibration in my chest. Soft, alive, patient. I reached for the railing. Cold metal biting my fingers. Shadows pooled in the corners. The light flickered once more, dimmer than before. The glow of the button pulsed. Soft, urging, beckoning. The car continued to descend. Silence absolute. Air thickened further. Smell of antiseptic mixed with something faintly coppery. A breath I could not take fully. The darkness pressed closer. Alive. The elevator slowed, then stopped. No movement, no sound. Yet the light on the button pulsed, insistent. I pressed it again. The car descended further, deeper into darkness. Cold pressed against my skin. Shadows swirled, patient, waiting. The doors remained closed. The floor unknown. And I realized I had no idea where this elevator would end. No sound but the hum. No air but thick, heavy antiseptic. No light but the pulsing button. I stood there. Breath shallow, alone, suspended between floors that should not exist. The elevator waiting, patient, silent. The hallway stretched, dimly lit, pale light spilling from the ceiling panels. I caught movement at the corner of my eye. A figure, a nurse, her uniform crisp, white, almost glowing in the soft light. She moved silently, no rustle of fabric, no breath audible. Her heels tapped, but not on the tiles I could hear. A phantom rhythm that lingered. I stepped closer. Shadows shifted along the walls. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old linen. Cold brushed my arms. She paused, always staring. Eyes fixed ahead, empty yet heavy. Something about her wrong. Time seemed to bend around her. Decades of steps condensed into a single motion. I moved again. Her figure remained distant, unblinking. Then, nothing. Gone. Only the echo of her heels remained. Soft, persistent, reverberating through the empty hall. As if the building remembered her steps long after she had vanished. The lights flickered. Shadows pulsed, reaching toward me. I could feel the cool air pressing against my skin. Breath shallow. Heart beating, uneasy, I whispered to myself. No answer. The hall stretched longer. The echo lingered. Each step I took seemed slower, heavier. I turned the corner, alone. But the echo followed, patient, persistent. Something about the way she moved. Something eternal, like she had walked these halls for decades. Watching, waiting, I stepped forward. The smell of antiseptic thickened. The echo of heels pressed closer, brushing the edges of my mind. I stopped. Breath caught. Shadows shifted again. Soft footsteps lingered, and then faded into silence. The hall was empty, but I knew she had been there. Or still was. Somewhere between the light and the shadows, I walked on slowly. Cold air brushing my neck. The faint scent of linen and bleach lingering. Alone, yet followed by the memory of her steps. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and old paint. A door waited at the end, peeling and faded. The number above it torn, unreadable. I hesitated, hand hovering over the chipped wood. The air felt colder here, heavier. Inside, a single chair faced the window. Pale light slanted across the floor, soft and thin. I heard it then. A low humming, almost a lullaby. Not for me. But it lingered, wrapping around the edges of the room. The chair creaked softly, though no one sat there. Shadows pooled in corners, heavy and quiet. I stepped closer, breath shallow. The hum swelled, vibrating against the walls, and then a figure, sitting briefly in the chair, eyes downcast, still. When I blinked, it was gone. Only the chair remained, empty. The lullaby fading into silence. The paint on the walls flaked under my fingers. Dust drifted in tiny clouds, smelling faintly of mildew and paper. A draft rustled the curtains, cold against my cheek. The chair didn't move, yet I could feel presence, something watching, something lingering where it had been. I circled the room slowly, each step pressing into the old floorboards. Soft, hollow, echoing faintly. The humming returned, quieter this time. A memory pressed against the back of my mind, impossible to place. I reached the window. Pale light fell across my hands. The glass trembled, though the air was still. The chair faced away from me as if waiting for something lost. I could feel its emptiness pressing, a void shaped like a person. I looked back again. Nothing. The figure did not return. Yet the silence was thick, heavy. The smell of old blankets and cold air wrapped around me. I touched the chair. Cold wood under my fingers. I imagined the figure sitting there, humming a lullaby I could almost hear. Then it vanished, leaving only the memory of its presence. The hallway beyond the door stretched dim and quiet. I stepped toward it, heart slow and uneven. The room remained behind me, pale and hollow. The hum drifted faintly, a whisper in the shadows, a lullaby for no one. I glanced back one last time. The chair faced the window, alone. Yet I knew it had not been empty. Not entirely. The hallway stretched in pale light. Cold, humming under the fluorescent bulbs. I smelled antiseptic, sharp and lingering. A cart rolled slowly ahead, empty, metal clinking softly. Each clink echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet. I stepped closer. Floorboards groaned beneath my shoes. The cart turned a corner. I followed, careful, breath shallow. The corner was empty. No cart, no sound, just the hum of the lights and my own heartbeat. I waited. A soft scrape of metal drew my eyes back. The cart returned, moving toward me on its own, no hands. No one. The clinking grew louder, steady, pulse-like. I reached out, but the air around it was cold, almost liquid, brushing my fingertips. I stepped back. Shadows flickered across the walls. The cart rolled closer, slow, deliberate, almost patient. I felt my stomach tighten. The scent of old rubber and iron hung in the air. The wheels scraped against the floor with a rhythm I could not ignore. A heartbeat or a warning. I stopped. The cart slowed, paused right before me. Nothing on it, yet I could feel presence, heavy and waiting. The lights above flickered. A soft hum in the walls rose like a whisper. The cart rolled again, backing slightly, then forward. A silent invitation. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air was thick, static against my skin, cold brushing my neck, shadows stretching across my chest. The cart paused. The clinking slowed, then stopped. Only silence. Except for my own shallow breathing, I leaned closer, curious and terrified. The wheels twitched. A soft metallic sigh as though it had exhaled. Then, it rolled back the way it came, disappearing around the corner once more. I didn't follow. I could still hear it distant, echoing softly down the hall. A heartbeat I could not escape. The hallway waited, pale and empty. No cart, no clinking, only the lingering scent of metal and antiseptic, and the memory of something moving on its own, something patient, something watching. The ICU was quiet. A pale light pooled across the linoleum floor. The hum of machines thrummed low, steady. I noticed the window high on the wall. It reflected the room, but not entirely. Something moved inside it that wasn't in the room. I stepped closer. Cold air brushed my skin. The scent of antiseptic lingered, sharp and metallic. The figure in the glass mimicked me. I lifted my hand. It lifted its own exactly the same. I froze. It paused when I paused, unblinking. A shiver ran down my spine. The reflection was pale, almost too still. Shadows stretched behind it, though the room remained empty. I turned away. The real room held only silence. Yet when I looked back at the window, the reflection stayed. Smiling faintly, the light shifted. Reflections warped slightly. I could see my own face beside it, but something was off. Edges blurred, almost leaking into the glass. The hum of the machines felt louder now, vibrating against my chest. I breathed slowly, trying to ground myself. But the window, it didn't breathe. It watched. I stepped sideways. The reflection mirrored me perfectly. Every twitch, every tilt of my head. It was patient, deliberate, waiting. I reached toward the glass. Cold fog met my fingertips. Not cold air. Not condensation. Something alive. I withdrew my hand quickly. The figure didn't move. It only smiled faintly, almost too thin, almost wrong. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Every breath sounded loud. The scent of antiseptic seemed thicker, as if the air had grown heavier. I tried to speak, but words caught in my throat. Silence filled the space around me. The reflection remained. A shadow flickered behind it, subtle like a curtain brushing against glass. I blinked. Gone. But the faint smile lingered. I stepped back again. The room felt smaller, tighter. Walls seemed to lean in. The hum of machines merged with my own pulse. I couldn't look away. The reflection, it knew me. Knew every movement before I made it. Waiting for the moment I might falter, I lowered my gaze. The window reflected only the room now. For a moment, nothing moved. I dared a breath, and then the smile returned. Soft, pale, watching from behind the glass. I left the ICU slowly. Floorboards groaned beneath my feet. The air followed me, thick, antiseptic, heavy. Even as I turned the corner, I could feel the eyes of the window on me, following each step, patient, unblinking, waiting. The hallway was silent. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly above. The air smelled faintly of damp paint and antiseptic. I found a door at the end of the corridor. Paint peeled at the edges. The handle was cold under my palm. I pushed it slowly. A draft rolled out carrying whispers. Not one voice, but hundreds. Soft, urgent, overlapping. None said my name. Yet every word felt directed at me. Each syllable brushed against my ears, vibrating along my chest. The room was empty. Shadows pooled in corners, still and waiting. The floorboards creaked under my hesitant steps. I stepped further in. Air grew thick, almost tangible. A faint metallic tang filled my nose. The whispers swelled. I could feel them in the walls, pressing against my skin, settling in the small of my back. The chairs were overturned. Tables scratched the floor. Yet no one had been here. And still, the voices lingered, moving like water through the room. I reached toward a table. The surface shivered under my touch. Cold energy pulsed from the wood, like the heartbeat of something unseen. I tried to listen closer. Each word was distinct yet impossible to separate. A faint rhythm emerged, a cadence I couldn't name. It echoed in my chest, syncing with my own pulse. I moved toward the center. The floor vibrated beneath my shoes. Air seemed heavier here, pressing against my face. The whispers rose like waves cresting just out of reach. I blinked. The shadows shifted slightly, though nothing had moved. Each surface, wall, floor, ceiling, quivered softly. It was as if the voices had weight, as if they were breathing, living within the room itself. I backed toward the door. The whispers didn't stop. They followed, curling around me, wrapping tight. I could feel them in my lungs, in my hair, in the small space between heartbeats. I paused, tried to take one steady breath. The voices ebbed for a moment, then surged again, sharper this time, all at once. A tide of forgotten words pressing at my mind. I turned fully. No one was there. Only pale light pooled through the high window. Dust swirled lazily in the beam. Yet the whispers, they lingered, growing softer, but never gone. I placed a hand on the doorframe. Cold seeped through my skin. A soft creak of floorboards under empty air echoed. The voices softened, retreating but still vibrating faintly in the corners, like distant thunder rolling underground. I left slowly. The door clicked shut behind me. The hallway seemed still, as if the room had never existed, but I could feel it behind the walls, humming quietly, waiting for someone to return. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and damp plaster. It was late. The silence pressed into my chest, slow and thick. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. Its pale light trembled, flickering, rhythmic, matching my heartbeat. Each flash carved shadows along the walls. They stretched unnaturally, reaching past corners that shouldn't exist. The floorboards groaned beneath my slow steps. I could feel the vibrations in my soles, like the building itself was breathing. I stopped. The light pulsed. A shadow shifted in a way that made my skin crawl. Longer now. Darker. Moving closer. My breath came shallow. The hum of electricity filled the quiet spaces. Every flicker revealed subtle changes. A chair where none had been. A door that seemed ajar, though I was certain I hadn't passed it. I took a step forward. The bulb dimmed, then flashed again, and I was certain something had been standing behind me all along. I froze. The air thickened, pressing against my lungs. Cold seeped through my clothes. I turned slowly. Nothing. Only the soft tremble of light across peeling paint. But I felt it. Eyes at the nape of my neck. A presence that did not belong. Every flicker confirmed it. Closer, watching, waiting. I tried to breathe. The light trembled again. Shadows stretched impossibly, crawling along the walls. The hum became louder, more insistent, vibrating through my chest. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, echoing back from the walls. I moved cautiously, fingers brushing the cold plaster. A slight draft whispered against my skin as though the building exhaled. Another flicker. I spun, nothing, yet the feeling persisted. Heavy, immovable. A soft pressure, like someone leaning just out of reach. The bulb shuddered once more, and for the briefest moment, the shadow seemed solid. A shape I could almost grasp, lingering behind the space where I had stood. I swallowed. The air smelled faintly of burned wiring. Cold sweat prickled my skin. The hum slowed. The hallway quieted. I stepped back. Flicker. Shadow. A heartbeat. I didn't look back again. The light settled into a dull glow. Shadows shrank, but the memory remained. The certainty that I had never truly been alone. I left the room slowly, footsteps soft on the floor. The bulb flickered once more behind me, a pale reminder that someone or something had always been there.